Well, hello, everybody. And here we are. I'm sure that Joe will be joining us shortly. My name is John Barnwell, and I'm here in the city of Detroit, north of the city of Detroit, actually, up towards the woods, the woodlands. And I'm going to be here with Joe Visconti, and he's out in West Hartford, Connecticut. And we thought it'd be advantageous if we ventured into a discussion regarding Rudolf Steiner on the Grail language. It's something that I spent a bit of time considering over the last few months, well, over the last 50 years, but specifically over the last few months. And as a result of that, I think that it's important to keep revisiting concepts that are so central to what we're attempting to accomplish here. And that's to be able to take the individual into a closer relationship to the realms of soul and spirit. And Rudolf Steiner is very clear when he makes reference to the nature of our relationship to all of this. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to do a little bit of digging here. Here it is. Didn't take too much. In the lecture cycle that was published as Approaching the Mystery of Golgotha, in lecture 2, Christ's Time of the Mystery of Golgotha and Christ in the 20th Century, which is on May 2nd in 1913. That's Collected Works, Volume 152. Therein he says, and I quote, "The man of the modern age brings his intellect to bear upon everything. He wants to comprehend things from the standpoint of the intellect. But the moment a man crosses the threshold leading from the world of the senses into the supersensible worlds, at that moment, the possibility of grasping reality by means of the intellect alone ceases. The intellect can render good service on the earth, but directly a man enters the supersensible worlds, although it still can be considered a useful instrument, it is no longer in itself a means of acquiring knowledge." Well, that's a challenging statement, to say the least. And when we look into that, we have to go to other lectures and dig around and deal with this, because if you look at the Grail tradition, you look at, say, well, what is Grail language? Probably the first thing that we could consider is that the Grail language is a picture language, and that what Rudolf Steiner continually approached from as many different vantage points, an attempt to, it's more like an impressionistic image of what he's attempting to describe, because he doesn't give you a definition. He doesn't give you a means where you can really totally nail it down, so to speak, with the abstract intellect. And so it's that abstract intellect, that brain-bound thinking that was developed so highly coming through the age of Gabriel, this basically the roughly 350 or so year period of the Archangel Gabriel, which led up to November of 1879, in which the age of Michael was able to begin. And in the development of that mystery of Gabriel, it's something that's very much about reflective. And you look at Gabriel as the archangel of the moon, whereas Michael is the archangel of the sun. And Rudolf Steiner is very adamant when he says that although Michael is to be seen in a group of 7 principal angels that serve as the harbingers and leaders of the archangelic periods that were laid out by Abbot Tritemius, the teacher of Paracelsus, and also many other significant individuals that are the kind of people you haven't even heard of. So that there's this very discrete bridge from the ancient world leading into the modern world. And through that understanding of the archangelic beings that are amongst the company of 9 stages of the celestial hierarchies as put forward out of the school of Dionysius the Areopagite that was founded by Paul, we have those divine spiritual beings of which everything that we encounter in life is the fruit of the activity of this diverse company of beings. But we don't experience it that way. We just seem to have an experience of some abstract notions regarding what we think is going on. And so very elaborate theories have been drummed up to try and explain the world, but they have to come up with a new version when they reprint the textbook the following year. So why is that? Well, Rudolf Steiner says very clearly that you can't even comprehend the world of life in using that kind of abstract thinking, that it'll only give you an image of basically the corpse of the world, the purely material functions within the world. And I see we have Joe waiting in the green room. There we go.
Happy Sunday.
I'm not even going to ask what happened.
You don't want to know.
Well, you got, speaking of the green room, yeah, you have green all around you.
Oh, I sure do.
I was just getting into a discussion regarding the Grail language, which is an extension of a conversation that Joe and I were having. And so rather than recapitulate, I'll just throw it over to Joe and see what he's going to run with.
Well, we talked this morning about this and last night, and it's something that's on our mind. After studying Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy for years, you start to realize that you're using your imagination, something that the actors use, artists use, and you're using it more in a different way. And it kind of creeps up on you after a while because first you're getting information and data from Rudolf Steiner's seership, and you're like, what's this and how does this work? So you're caught up with a lot of the intellectual comparisons and history and things and try to work out. But as you're doing that, if you step back and it starts to happen, you realize that when you look out of your eyes, I'm looking out the front window of my house over here, and you see the world configured in a certain way. It's nothing more than images and pictures, and in the living room and the dining room, and there's these things, and so we go around sewing them together, in concepts or in verbiage or language as we're doing right now. But in all reality, they don't have a language. They're there and they exist. They were created. They're there. Even a plant, it's doing its thing. And so you start to recognize that there's your activity, your own spiritual activity of thinking, is done in picture form, and there's a whole bunch of processes which I'm sure you've opened up with that each of us since birth are perpetually weaving together, sewing together through suggestion, through education, through parents, siblings, peers, etc. And we're putting this together. This huge activity going around, and science has tried to take that and and describe it in its own way, abstractly, saying this is what's really occurring, and these, giving a name or a science to each thing that is being done. And they leave so much out because they can't, I'm putting this in layman's terms today, but it ends up becoming flashes in our mind that happen so quickly. A quick little intuition, boom, not even a millisecond, you saw an image, and then we just stumble across it and we start doing that thing or combining it. So there's so many of these processes of image thinking that are coming from the world bombarding us, and then also from our intuition, from the spiritual world, from the dead around us, from angels. And so all this is coming into Grand Central Station of our mind, and science is, going around, a government authority trying to tell you what track you're on, what this means, where this goes, and giving some logic to it. Yet all the people getting off those trains and getting on the trains with their baggage and their stuff are all, it's the content of reality. And but it happens in image form, and so much of it cannot be what's the word I'm looking for? It can't be intellectualized away. The intellectual powers to describe through language are not sufficient to really, and we've all had this happen. You and I've talked about this before. Boom, man. Why didn't I do that? I heard that. I knew I should have done that or bought that or got that or whatever. Why didn't I listen to myself? So there's things that are coming in that are strong, very directive. Then there's things that are coming in much more subtle in our life. And so much of life is missing. It's going behind the movie screen at the theater. It's not even getting on the screen. And we're just limited by time and space to be able to comprehend what Rudolf Steiner does. He explodes the depth and the meaning of these things, giving origin and the beginnings of how it came, what these things are for, how the process is behind the world that we see with our through our physical body, how it really works. And if without that, we end up getting partial information from science and the world that puts together different cosmology, but all in all, it is a language through anthroposophy that you pick up, and it's in imagery, and it has more than one meaning, and that's the whole key. Where science is really maybe under the dictionary meaning 1, 2, and 3, but we're in a world that says this. These are only reading glasses. That's all they are. That's all they can be. No, they're not. Just because they look like that and they have a function, they're more than that. And that's where the language and the pictorial language comes in, where morphology from Goethe and that morphology can come in, and we can look at things and in freedom and play around, especially when we have problems and troubles. The answers are right there all around us. Everybody who's out there listening or watching, whatever your problems, just put them on a table. I'm on my dining room table now. Look at them, move them around piece by piece, this over here, that over there. Change your perspective. Use of 5 or 6 exercises of Rudolf Steiner: feeling, thinking, willing, objectivity, open-mindedness, and look and let these things speak to you in imagery. Anyway, that's a little bit of a layman's kind of artistic twist on what we were talking about earlier.
Yes, and when you get into looking at this through the mysteries of time, which is what I continually make reference to, you have to confront within Rudolf Steiner's work the descriptions he gives of the ancient world, but there's a key understandings that one can derive when he describes the ancient world, because he says that in the ancient world, humanity lived in a relationship to the realms of soul and spirit, and it was something that was gifted to them just by their inherent nature. But in 747 BC, mankind as a whole moved into the intellectual soul period, which ultimately resolves itself into what he called the higher feelings soul. But so that's a clue at what we're getting at, because see, if you get into that intellectual soul period and you're talking about moving into the realm of philosophy and all of these viewpoints that one might create through the gift of language to describe the world rather than being in a relationship, at least with the memory of the perception of the ancient world. But it became necessary that mankind became fully engaged with earthly existence. And so that clairvoyant capacity gradually went away and left us standing here on our own 2 feet and attempting to describe the world through the external senses and this apparatus. And basically, that's the way you could look at the physical and etheric, is that this is a vehicle that you use to be able to traverse this world, but it's not you, okay? It's yours, but it's not you, see?
Yeah.
And Rudolf Steiner is very adamant about that also, because when we go to sleep, we go into the realms of sleep. And earlier in mankind's evolution, he describes how that transition was more intimate in that we were aware of the realm in which dreaming took place during our waking life. And likewise, it could carry over. And the whole idea of the initiation of the ancient world, or the principal idea, is to be able to have continuity of consciousness from your waking day consciousness moving into your nighttime consciousness. And so when you go back to the myths and legends regarding initiation, and they, like in Egypt, they talk about entering into the world and finding Osiris, right? That's their relationship to this cosmic gift of the sun being the Christ. But Rudolf Steiner says that when Moses left Egypt, he took those mysteries with him. That's a very quixotic statement. I mean, there's nobody, and believe me, I gotta, as I've shown many times, I've done extensive searching. I created this 4-volume bibliography of the ancient world, spanning Egypt and Mesopotamia. And I can assure you that there's a continuity amongst all the different cultures, although they use their different language systems, they all point to the similar themes, and the whole idea of ancient Atlantis and all of that is provided in these ancient mysteries. And through running the largest esoteric bookstore in the world, I can assure you that that's something that's also to be found in other cultures beyond those limits, getting into ancient India and the American Indians, my conversations with Thomas Binyaki about how the earth is the 4th world. And so when you get into understanding these things from their own nature, rather than attempting to ascribe some kind of abstract description, wanting to define it within our realm of looking at things, you'll find that the best way to make that transition into those realms is to be able to transform your ideas into pictures.
Correct. To share them. Otherwise, you're limited by the language. But you said something earlier just now that struck a chord with me about memory. And I've been working on this with a couple of friends of mine who aren't into what we're into. But nonetheless, I try to always disprove different things, because sometimes it's the best thing you can do for yourself is to look at your opinions, the things you picked up from the world or from anywhere, anthroposophy as well, and look at them and beat them up, prosecute them, so that you can find, and as a builder, I do the same thing. You're just not going to, wait a second, if you don't step back and use the transit and use the plumb bob and use the level, you can just start building. You go off a quarter of an inch and you start going down 50 feet, 100 feet. All of a sudden, the wall's going off 4 feet and everything you're building is out of plumb. And so it's the same thing. This is where the masons and the building of the temples, you have to always self-correct and self-check as much as possible so you don't error, not a little bit, but a lot over time. And so the thing you said was memory. And this is important. I'll just put it out there because it does have to do, memory is almost nothing but pictures. We don't hear language. I just was thinking, I was over in Simsbury. I got tied up in traffic and I had a memory of going hunting years ago, whatever. I saw the flashes of my memories coming down a road. I didn't hear long paragraphs of words and discussions of what I was doing if someone was in the car with me 20, 30, 40 years ago. It just occurred in imagery. Our memories are in imagery. They also could have smell. They could have many different senses, and even beyond the senses, that feeling of well-being in the 12 senses Rudolf Steiner speaks about. But going back to Egypt, as you said, where are the memories of what occurred beyond just the stones left over from the pyramid and things we can measure and touch and crumbled into sand? Where is the memory? Where are our memories? And so we'll find that most of them are in picture form. Rudolf Steiner says that our memories are stored on little like CD discs in our etheric body. That's where our memories are, where they get Mr. A, I call them. They bring up, that's the disk to store things on, but they are stored within our etheric. They're not stored in some gray matter in our brain. And where are the memories of the world outside the human being? Where are the memories? I'm only going to open these questions up. The answers are different than we'll talk about, but they exist in experience. They exist in being. There's a graduation of beings that have progressed, including our souls from other lives. But where is memory? It's in picture form, but where are the pictures for the world? And then we get a bit of that with the Akashic record that Rudolf Steiner reads, and many people are able to enter and read. And then if you tie that in with recollection of, let's say, a court case, and the prosecutors got information, the defense attorneys got information, and they're putting together and they're struggling to find the truth of a crime scene or who done it. And so what are they all really doing? They're all working through the law to try to get on the witness stand, pull testimony, bring physical evidence, circumstantial. What are they doing? They're actually in the Akashic record. And that's what the whole fear of a court case is, that the truth will come out because it's pressed into the carbonic acid, into the ethers. And so I'm saying this because this is where the imagery is coming out of our etheric body, Rudolf Steiner says. And with our television and our more than radio, television, and computers, we're being bombarded by man-made imagery that's trying to close down that etheric imagery and the etheric of the world. The body of Christ is the etheric of the world, his memories. So when we talk language and we talk picture form, where is all this coming from? I'm not going to go further. I just put a little teasers out here with this, but really, where are all these pictures coming from? Where are they stored? Are they floating in the air? Are they in the gray matter of your head? Because everyone in every walk of life is constantly using pictorial imagery. And yet at the same time, they all have different views, which is why you see politics and you see cultures. They all look at these things differently. But I'm gonna let you take over. I wanted to open. I didn't really want to close with it, answers.
And the first step is to realize that there is a first step. Okay, and the beauty of that is that it's okay to have a feeling like you're at the beginning of something, and that you don't have to have that sense of conviction of that you're finally there. First of all, you are there. It's just a question of what is your consciousness like regarding this place in which you exist. And you could sit there and you can from now to a month of Sundays and try to think it through and come up with all manner of theories, and they're all floating out there. But Rudolf Steiner is very adamant, like that quotation I read at the very beginning, that will not serve to get you to that, because when you enter into the realm of soul and spirit, he talks about how what we utilize to think in abstract concepts is language. And basically what that is you're forming an imprint upon the divine spiritual beings that actually are the field of consciousness in which your thinking is taking place. And you of course think that you have your ideas, and it's all this activity that you're doing, and that you see so much today, people that their version of metaphysics is all about all these energy fields and frequencies, and they get into all kinds of measure, number, and weight configurations that attempt to describe the reality in which we live. But yet, that will not give you the connection to that realm. It's the actual act of entering into the realm of pictures and entering into the realms of wonder, awe, and reverence. It's the moods, actually, ironically, that transport one. And going back to what I was saying about the intellectual soul period, which ended in 1413, 1414. So it's from 747 BC to 1413, 1414 AD. And in that intellectual soul period, you'll notice that there was these great conflicts that took place over the manner in which, for example, Jesus Christ, what was he? Was he a man? Was he like this initiate man? Like in today's description, you'd think he's just, he's a really nice guy who repeated a bunch of things that have been said by other people. And so they try to dismiss Christ as a divine being, whereas there's attempts of every flavor, attempting to come to an understanding of the nature of Christ. And she said it was not possible during that time period to really come to a spiritual scientific understanding of the nature of what the Christ being is. That's only become possible through the current time. And that has to do with the effect that results from the developments that took place within the age of Gabriel, which immediately preceded our current age of Michael. And Rudolf Steiner says that all the developments in modern science have come about through the activity of the Archangel Gabriel in that period, and along with the developments within those realm of the brain, that whole highly developed brain thinking that took place during the age of the intellectual soul, that in its highest expression, he called it the higher feeling soul. So they could develop these feelings of aspiration to the spiritual world. And it's this aspiration of feeling that you see so much addressed in the medieval philosophers and all that. And so they're all very adamant about their view as to what is the nature of the Trinity, what is the nature of Jesus Christ and the incarnation, and what happened at various events within Scripture. But nonetheless, Rudolf Steiner is very clear in that they didn't have the means to be able to accomplish that understanding. And that's not just because they didn't have certain strings of ideas, but they didn't have the relationship that's developed within our current period with the Archangel Michael, the Archangel of the Sun. And Rudolf Steiner says that although he's in the company of the seven archangels of the archangelic periods, nonetheless, he should be seen as distinct from them, just as the sun is distinct from the planets. So he is the greatest. He is the the absolute countenance of divinity as far as our relationship to the divine spiritual world. And Rudolf Steiner is very clear when he talks about how our relationship to the Christ at this time, that Christ can be found in angelic form, dwelling within the life of the etheric world. But what does one do with a concept like that? How does one approach a concept like that? When it's that thin, knife edge, narrow center that gives one the relationship to entering into a relationship with that, because you see the etheric and the astral and the ego and the physical, that there's a meeting between these, and that's the place in which consciousness takes place. And so if one attributes one's thinking to the etheric and physical, then you come out with the abstract ideations of modern science. Whereas if you could take the picture language and allow that to become a portal, so to speak, for the influx of the mycalic force, then it becomes something that translates into an intimate relationship with the spiritual world. And it's the relationship you want to cultivate, because, like I said earlier, you're not your physical etheric. They're the vehicles that you're, so to speak, driving around in the physical world. And that when you just go to your astral and ego, you go to sleep, you lose consciousness because you haven't developed that side of your being sufficiently to be able to have continuity of consciousness. And through the developments that take place through initiation, you gain that to where you can move into that realm and experience a full conscious state within that realm, with the inclusion of the faculties that one has developed on this side of the threshold.
And there's something else important. These pictures are living pictures. And you can see in our little modern world here on the iPhone, and where they have something called live photos. You can see Mr. A, Mr. Araman, looking to always mimic Devachan, mimic heaven. We always see the footprints of what he does. And if you look just at the material world, you'll find where he gets it from. There's no ability to create something new. And so living pictures is something important to think about also, so that you're not thinking you're just going to get a painting on the wall, or a visual that's static. The pictures will present themselves like in a dream. Sometimes they'll come alive, and there'll be a semblance. There's many different techniques to try to comprehend what's being spoken through this imagery in picture form. Again, these are things that frighten the hell out of left brain thinking, because measure, number, and weight, proof, that one thing only meaning. So it's a very frightful thing. It's not like being on LSD, which I've never done, but I've seen different interpretations of what happens when things start to come alive. I don't mean it that way, but they are alive. They're living pictures, living waters, and vibrations, because there's beings behind it. This is the other thing. The pictures have being behind them. They're just not an abstract imagery or mental picture. If you close your mind and see something, they're alive, and they have beings. And the ability to develop our own inner self with the outer world is something that this is all about. How do I know? How do you tell somebody else something? It's a personal thing. And the thing with Christ in the etheric, it is a personal thing. So you have living experience, personal, and it's not something that you're going to be able to put on Facebook Marketplace and sell. There's no measure, number, and weight to this. These are things, though, that are deep and that are transformative in our lives. They're the most precious, and they're priceless, yet they can't be copied or replicated or sold or found in an abstract the old libraries had the drawers with the bookshelves, and again, these are very scary. The fear of the spiritual world, the fear of what is this? How do I know what it is? How do I define it? How do I prove? How am I sure? This is where faith, this is where feeling, this is where asking, getting an answer, and everything actually that you'll find in religions that tell you to do. They're telling you to pray, to have faith, to wait. All those things are actually true, but the pictures that come are alive. I'd like to leave it at that. It's much more than that, but again, I can't abstractly define it.
Well, yes, that's the key, is knowing that in the eyes of the spirit, we're all equal. That's where we're equal, and it's through that understanding of the realms of spirit that one develops the soul capacities to be able to have cognizance of it. That it's something that's there. You'd like, Joe, you frequently made the case. You go up to people and you ask them if they believe in angels, and they say yes, but what does that mean to them? What do they think is the significance of that? And when you go to the work of Rudolf Steiner and you find that there's some 36.5 feet of shelf space of material that's entirely consistent internally, it's something that's a profound challenge to try and make a determination as to all the many things that Rudolf Steiner says, and yet never get around to giving one definitions that one can really nail it down. And so you'll be going along and you think, I got it. And then a new lecture cycle will be translated, and then you read it and you realize you're 180 degrees off course. And so that in and of itself gives you the humility before the robe of glory, so to speak. But that being said, it's your striving that gives you that impetus. And in striving along these lines, Rudolf Steiner makes the point. He makes this point about myths, legends, and fairy tales and all those things, that they build in you the capacity to be able to come to an understanding through spiritual science in a future incarnation.
Because there's being in them. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, it's actually, you are actually developing and cultivating a relationship to the spiritual world, and that these myths, legends, and even fairy tales were things that were left to us to serve as that purpose, to serve as a bridge into the supersensible, and that these things were left to us by initiates, people that had been through the various mystery center knowledge, and that in coming into relationship with that, it's like a message in a bottle, that these ancient legends and all that have something to tell us if you have the key to unlock its secrets. And of course, one of the processes by which this occurs is through contemplating it through the 7 unutterable secrets, or the 7 great mysteries as they're described by C.G. Harrison, the unutterable secrets by Madame Blavatsky. Rudolf Steiner calls them the 7 great mysteries, and it goes through that whole sequence. I developed that thoroughly in my second volume, the Arcana of Light on the Path, but that's being able to look at all the various facets of this wisdom, because Rudolf Steiner had made the point, and people are asking, why is this so complicated? And he says, this is the Christ language. This is the language that you need to be able to come into an intimate relationship with the realities of the spiritual world, so that when you start to understand old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan, these are stages of your journey. And so now, as we're human beings, as St. Paul says, in the Jupiter condition, ye shall be as the angels. And then you could add on to that in the Venus stage, as an archangel and the Vulcan stage as an archai. And so this is something that is to be contemplated with a great deal of awe. I mean, you have to stand in awe before that to realize that you've been singled out just by the circumstances of your journey, so that you all of a sudden have found out that there is such a journey. Most people, they don't have that luck. They don't know that you're on this journey, and that, like Thomas Beniakia said, this is the fourth world. It's not the last one, it's the fourth one. And there's 7 in the series.
The Christ language is also, he states it. Christ states it. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Well, what is the direction, the path, the destiny? I am the way. It's a destiny. Little, personal, large, big. It's a destiny. It's a way. What is the truth? I just talked about a builder. Is it true? What does that mean? Is it plumb? Is it level? Is it transit? Is the height? Can it stand on its own in reality, or will it collapse because it's a lie or an aberration? Is it true? And the life comes from that also. I am the life. So in this language is life. It's truth. It stands on its own and it's able to endure. And it is the way for wherever you happen to be joining it. The Christ language is alive. Again, it's alive that way. And those interpretations have been used so many different ways with Christ, but it's the best thing to say is that's exactly how we're able, and we do this. And here's the other thing: they're doing a lot of this. Its problem is it's commingled like a bad diamond with a bunch of black spots in it. It's commingled materialism. And personal problems and karma gone wrong. So there's a lot of stuff in there, but mankind is, I believe, as I watch, the more and more chaos I see, the more and more whatever in life in the world, the more and more the general public is like, no, we're good. We'll do this on our own. And they have this government of this world science over, and people know they have to deal with it. But at the same time, they realize everyone realizes that core thing about their life, the meaning of their life, what they really want. And man, like the believing in angels, they believe, the general public, I believe, believes that there is much more. They don't know all of it. They don't need to know it, but they're not buying it all from science. And after this COVID stuff, they're definitely not buying science or academia or any of that. And so we're in a path, I really think it's a great time in the world. Christ is active, and he's active as a revolutionary. Because his language is revolutionary in our time right now, by what I just spoke, what you've been saying since you got on the air. It's a revolution in thinking. It's a revolution in living. It doesn't mean killing, shooting. It's like the insurrection, not an insurrection, not that kind of revolution, but an overthrow of materialism. That's what's world, and materialism is trying as much as it can to continue to put programs, as Rudolf Steiner said, anything into the 21st century that does not serve man will not last. The program, the policy making, education, it will not endure. And this is why we keep seeing everything change and being thrown out on the next thing and the next lie and the next deviation. And people have had it. They want the basic in education. They want basic healthcare. They want the basic thing. And when they're really done, and that is Christ working. It sounds like a rouser, because it is that rabble rousing we're seeing in the world, even left to the aisle. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if you're completely accurate on how you're seeing it. It's that your spiritual activity is engaged, and you're fighting for freedom, you're fighting for knowledge, and you're fighting for everybody to be able to have their abilities and their life. And so Christ is a revolutionary. His language is revolutionary. It's taking over as we see science, religions, and all of them fall away. It's just like he said, I do not seek the honor of men. So Christ says, I do not seek the honor of men. So you're not going to find him in places that need to coin him or brand him and put him up on a shelf at the mall. It's going to appear revolutionary. It's going to appear as though it belongs to no nation, like Galilee. It belongs to nothing, and everybody is doing this. He's always appeared in pop culture, Christ. He's always appeared in politics. He's everywhere. But what is he? I just described some of it. It's those things that want to think, that want to struggle to find, and it gets down to memes. And why? Because memes are pictures. Memes are a photo with some words that mean to say something. And again, it's a more of a materialistic approach to what we're speaking about, but in its lowest vibration, is still, people know pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I trust mankind. I trust the cosmos. I've never been more positive. The more the world gets crazy, the more I realize we are now, and how powerful and yet what's the word? Innocent and gentle that Christ's activity is amongst the power hungry and the greed and the sexual deviancy and all of it, wars, how gentle and yet powerful he is, and he moves amongst us, and moves amongst each person and all day long. And we have to struggle to identify him in our lives, because there is no place, like I said, on the shelf to find him. But identifying his activity and his language is, I think the world is really moving. It's been moving that way, contrary to what we think we read in the papers.
Yeah, it's, you'd think the way things are going that we're on a fast train to hell, you know, and that is a result of exposing the machinations of the adversaries. And it's important to realize, when you expose the machinations of the adversaries, Lucifer and Ahriman, that you don't let it drown you, because it's that part of you that is above this that finds the equilibrium to balance that out. And like Rudolf Steiner says, and I frequently refer to this, but he says the divine spiritual beings do not like to be ignored. And so if we don't pursue the path of spirit and soul, that what happens is we end up with a world that's in chaos. That's literally what happens, because the realms of being by which we attempt to solve the world within the abstract brain-bound thinking can only lead to chaos, because it's not true. It's not real. It's a result of our illusory relationship to the world. And so in finding, like Rudolf Steiner was looking for, 4 times 12 people capable of manifesting Michaelic thought. That's not a terribly ambitious goal. So we see that if we can each contribute, at least at some point in the day, a striving that has to do with the aspiration towards sense-free thinking, then we're contributing to that overall challenge. And what would sense-free thinking be? Well, it's a thought that isn't something that you derive from your senses. Like, wisdom lives in the light. That's something that I'm sure you haven't seen on your day-to-day existence. And so you have that wisdom living in the light is something. What is the light? Light's invisible, isn't it? Because it doesn't become visible until it encounters something. And so it has this idea of being working everywhere. At night, when you look up at the night sky, do you think that the sun isn't still out there? And if the sunlight was visible, then you'd see it shining by from the direction of the sun, but you don't, do you? Because it's invisible until it encounters something. And so it is with your thoughts. If you can make the invisible visible, it has to do with bringing something to it. And so it's an artistic journey. It's an attempt to try and begin to paint these images within your mind so that you can come to a relationship to them. And there's something that I had here, and I set aside. Go ahead and talk. I'm going to dig something up, Joe.
Okay, yeah. Well, again, I'm going to be Mr. Upbeat. I do political shows and everything, and it doesn't really matter the issues. We have moved past. We've talked about this before. The time of the 40th day in the desert. We are in the 40th day when the angels administer to Jesus. This is the time we're going to be until the year 2000, and I think it's 40, and was why we see so much happening with materialistic approach to administering health to people through drugs and vaccines, etc. But this is a time of healing. This right now, war will come, conflict will come in opposition to true Christ healing, Michael healing, and again, it doesn't matter what your religion is. These are spiritual beings. They are going to operate contrary or regardless of being a Muslim or being Jewish or being Catholic or Presbyterian or Baptist or being an atheist. They're going to work anyway. These are underlying powers and forces in the world, and they are working. What can happen is if you pick up anthroposophy, seeking to understand just the activity to seek to understand. And why would that be? Not so that you could do it yourself instead of hiring a contractor, but seeking to understand so that you are integrated in reality. Again, the truth, the way, the purpose, the understanding, because this is the time of the consciousness soul. We must understand and know. And so our activity to try to seek, not out of being curiosity, Rudolf Steiner speaks against that, or have power, but actually to understand so the world can be a better place, because the left brain, it needs answers it's not going to get. We need to start thinking with the heart. This is where the spiritual forces come in. And but I'm so positive lately that we are moving in that direction. The debris field that we're seeing scattered, the public is not going to tolerate it much longer. In our lifetime, we've all seen too much. We've been through too much, and they're just going to start rejecting it. Just reject anything that they know intrinsically, emotionally, intuitively. That's not helpful. That's not good.
Yes, it's this unfolding of a truly human being. And there's something that I jotted down some time ago regarding that challenge. And I say, just as love is felt as a heart force, so conscience is the action of this heart force, resonating in harmony with the life of thought. This is the still small voice spoken of in the Gospel of John, a golden seed planted from above that must be nurtured. And so the acts of will that freely arise through this heart force or negate it will determine the totality of your character and, as a result, your future life and being. For if you lack conscience, you are not yet truly human, not yet truly living, but only sleeping within an illusory dream of life. Within this dream, you are but merely a shadow of life, waiting for humanness to arise, needlessly creating more pain and suffering for oneself and others. There are those that may never find this. Be kind to them, that they may find their way through this self-created cold world of darkness to the heart force of warmth and light of which I speak. I've pondered this my whole life, and I'm convinced this is truly, really all one needs to know in order to find a sure path to wholeness as a truly human being. And so, can't say much more than that. I mean, if you go to the first 14 verses of the Gospel of John, it's all there in seed form. Or when Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It's like he's saying, well, okay, Saturn, Sun, Moon. I mean, it's the Christ language. He's speaking in that imaginal realm. And that's why in Scripture, all the religions, really, they all speak in picture language, because the abstract concepts, they provide a barrier of sorts to be able to enter into communion with the realm of soul and spirit. That that you have to allow these things to participate in your consciousness. And so Rudolf Steiner said to move into the future, what we need to do is be able to take our concepts and turn them into pictures. And that being said, I want to thank everybody that shows up here and listens to our musings. And this podcast has been made possible by the generous support of numerous people, including Douglas and Thailand, Vadim and Vivian, and Lee and Tim and Neil, and Paula and Rick and Mike and Beth. All these people out there that have been so steadfast in attempting to discern what it is we're talking about here. And that's the thing that is a challenge for me, is to find something worth saying when so many good things have already been said. But I think that in light of that, if you want to buy me a cup of coffee as some kind of reward for my efforts, however failing I may be at times, that's paypal.me/John Barnwell 888. No donation is too small. And it's always good to be here with my buddy Joe and see if we can somehow get closer. But it seems as though the more you walk towards your goal, it recedes in the distance.
And Marie, the and what do I really want? And you'd be surprised that we find out that sometimes the things we think we want, the things we think we want to become, the experiences we want to have, there's a reason for them. And sometimes we do the thing that I didn't realize it would be like that. So what was wrong with my thinking? We'll all do that. What was I thinking? Why go there? What was I thinking? And you weren't thinking, or other things are getting in the, they push you off the train tracks. And so I guess it's the personal relationship you have with God, the belief in the spiritual world, even if you can't understand all the details, belief that's got us here at our age to get through life on a planet that's spinning in space, and at the same time it's not. At the same time, that's physical. But the answers are always in front of us. It's all the way we look at it. That's the best thing I can say there. Oh,
absolutely. And before I forget, my first volume is the Arcana of the Grail Angel. It's currently reprinting. I haven't carved out the time yet. I'm deciding whether I'm going to just reprint it or revise it or what I'm going to do. So I don't know yet. But my second volume is still available, Arcana of Light on the Path. And it has the full series of Grail diagrams, as I call them. And we have it to where it lays out Rudolf Steiner's cosmology to help you enter into this moral imagination. And so you can get this available volume on eBay. There's a link below, and you can download the preface by William Bento, the noted Strasser and psychologist. You can download for free on my academia link below, and you can also contact me if you're outside the US to be able to get my book. And but if you're in the continental US, you can find it on eBay. And so I guess in closing, what I'd like to do is share an alchemical poem in wonderful picture language by the Comte Saint-Germain. Curious stater, curious scrutator of the whole of nature. I have known the great all, its principle and its end. I have seen gold in its power deep within the mind. I have seized its material and surprised its leaven. I explained by what art the soul within the mother's womb makes it home, carries it out, and as a grape seed placed against a grain of wheat under the humid earth, The one plant, the other vine, are the bread and wine. Nothing was, God willed, and nothing became something. In my doubting, I sought out that on which the universe is poised. Nothing appeared to sustain the equilibrium or to serve as a support. Finally, with the weights of praise and of blame, I weighed the eternal. It called my soul. I died. I adored. I knew nothing more. Thank you all so much.